Ever wish you could, like, hit the gym, but for your brain?
Yeah.
Well, get ready, because today we're diving into how learning a new language actually rewires your brain.
Okay.
We're talking, like, literally reshaping it, like a good workout.
Right.
We've got some incredible research lined up that suggests our brains are way more flexible than we thought. Imagine, like, your brain bulking up with language learning,
Wow.
developing this hidden talent for sharper focus
Mm-hmm.
and even protection as we age.
Right.
And the best part is, this whole process is surprisingly similar to building a house.
Really?
To guide us through this architectural marvel that we call the brain, I've got an expert with me today.
It's really remarkable.
Yeah.
For years, we thought our brains were pretty much fixed after childhood.
Mm-hmm.
But language learning research,
Yeah.
it's showing us just how wrong we were.
Interesting.
Our brains are constantly adapting, especially when we challenge them with new languages.
Okay, so let's unpack this whole rewiring idea. What does that even look like in our brains? I always picture our brains as these delicate computer chips, you know?
Yeah.
One wrong move, and it's game over.
Well, that's a pretty common misconception.
Yeah.
Your brain is actually much more adaptable than you might think.
Oh, okay.
A better analogy is to think of it like a muscle.
Mm-hmm.
The more you use it, the stronger it gets,
Mm-hmm.
even building new connections.
So instead of bench pressing weights,
Right.
we're conjugating verbs.
Yes.
I can get on board with that.
And this incredible ability of the brain to change and adapt, this is called neuroplasticity.
Neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
Sounds complicated.
It's really not. It just means that our experiences can physically change our brains, forming new pathways and strengthening existing ones. When you learn a new language, you're essentially building new roads in your brain, especially the left hemisphere.
Interesting.
That's the brain's language hub.
Like creating shortcuts for all that new vocabulary and grammar.
Exactly. And researchers at the Max Planck Institute,
Okay.
using brain imaging technology, they've actually observed these changes.
Wow.
They found that learning a second language increases gray matter density in specific regions. That's the information processing powerhouse of your brain.
So it's like my brain is literally getting a workout and bulking up in those areas.
Yes.
That's incredible. But let's zoom in even further.
Okay.
We're talking about real physical changes happening at a microscopic level, right? What about those synapses I hear so much about?
Now this is where it gets fascinating. Synapses are these tiny gaps between neurons,
Okay.
the cells that transmit information throughout your brain.
Uh-huh.
Think of them like bridges connecting different parts of your brain.
Okay, I'm picturing those tiny bridges now. How does learning a language affect them?
Learning makes these synapses more efficient, faster, and more flexible. It's like upgrading your brain's wiring for smoother, faster communication. Every new word, every conversation strengthens these connections.
So even when I'm fumbling through a conversation in a new language,
Right.
my brain is actually getting a workout and building those connections.
Yeah,
Tell me more.
you've got it.
Wow.
Those mistakes are actually valuable learning moments for your brain, even if they feel frustrating in the moment. And this amazing adaptability of our synapses, this is called synaptic plasticity.
Synaptic plasticity. I'm already starting to feel smarter just knowing these terms. But seriously, this is amazing stuff.
It is, yeah.
Learning a language isn't just about speaking.
Right.
It's about reshaping the physical structure of our brains.
Yeah.
Now, I know there's even more to it than that. We're not just talking about fluency, are we?
No.
There are some pretty big brain benefits to flexing those language muscles. Bo.
You're absolutely right. And one area where the research is particularly exciting is in the impact of bilingualism on cognitive function,
Okay.
especially as we age.
Okay, now we're talking. I've always been curious about this. Spill the tea. Does speaking more than one language really make you smarter?
Well, smarter might be a bit of an oversimplification, but the research does suggest that knowing multiple languages can have
Yeah.
some pretty remarkable benefits for our brains, especially as we get older.
Okay, you've definitely piqued my interest. What kind of benefits are we talking about here?
Well, remember how we talked about gray matter being like the brain's muscle?
Mm-hmm.
Well, studies have shown that bilingual people, especially those who learned a second language early in life,
Okay.
they tend to have denser gray matter in certain brain regions
Hmm.
compared to those who only speak one language.
So it's like their brains are getting a constant workout
Yeah.
even when they don't realize it, just
Mm.
just by navigating between languages.
That's a great way to put it. And this increased gray matter density has been linked to all sorts of cognitive advantages,
About what?
like better attention span, sharper memory, and even a delayed onset of age-related cognitive decline, like Alzheimer's disease.
Wow, that's amazing. It's like investing in your future brain health by simply learning another language.
Right.
But what's actually going on in those bilingual brains
Yeah.
that gives them this cognitive edge?
It's still an area of active research,
Okay.
but one theory
Yeah.
is that the constant act of switching between languages, even unconsciously,
Right.
it acts like a kind of mental cross-training for the brain. It strengthens the cognitive muscles
Okay.
responsible for executive functions like attention, inhibition, and multitasking.
So it's like their brains are constantly doing these mental gymnastics,
Yeah.
which keeps them more agile and adaptable even as they age. I like the idea of my brain staying in shape.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's like having a more finely tuned instrument able to process information more efficiently and resist that cognitive decline
Yeah.
we often see with aging.
You know, it makes you wonder why we aren't all encouraged to learn multiple languages from a young age. Talk about untapped potential. but for now,
Right.
let's shift gears a bit and talk about the actual process of building those language skills in our brains.
Okay, yeah.
I'll be the first to admit it can feel like an uphill battle sometimes.
Sure.
I'm always trying to cram new vocabulary into my brain, but it often feels like it goes in one ear and out the other.
Hmm.
What's the secret to making all that new information stick?
Well, think of it this way. Learning a new language is like building a house.
Okay.
You need different types of memory working together to make it happen.
Okay, I love a good analogy. Walk me through this construction process.
Okay, so your short-term memory,
Uh.
sometimes called working memory,
Okay.
it's like the construction site where you temporarily store new words and grammar rules.
Okay.
It's a mental workbench where you're first encountering these linguistic building blocks.
It's like when I'm trying to follow a recipe in a new language, juggling all those unfamiliar ingredients and instructions in my head at once.
Yeah, you've got it. But just like a construction site,
Right.
your short-term memory has limited capacity.
Right.
You can't just keep piling on new information without a plan to integrate it
Right.
into something more permanent. That's where your long-term memory comes into play.
Ah, so that's where we move from the construction site to the actual house,
Mhm.
taking all that new language knowledge and making it stick.
Exactly. And just like constructing a solid, lasting house,
Okay.
moving information from short-term to long-term memory requires a strategic approach. There are some key techniques we can use to make those memories last.
Well, don't leave us hanging. Our listeners are ready to build some serious language mansions in their minds.
Yeah.
What are these memory-boosting techniques? Okay, let's talk building materials. What can we use to make these language houses strong and
Well,
sturdy and built to last?
Well, one of the most important tools in our language learning toolkit is repetition.
No surprise there. It's like they say, practice makes perfect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like hammering in a nail. You wouldn't just hit it once and expect it to hold the entire house together.
Right.
The more you encounter a word or phrase, the stronger that memory trace becomes in your brain.
So those flashcards I keep meaning to use do have a purpose after all.
Absolutely.
Right.
But it's not just about mindlessly drilling vocabulary. The context in which you learn new words matters too.
Okay.
Our brains, they thrive on making connections.
That makes sense. It's like I could memorize the word for apple from a list,
Right.
but I'm much more likely to remember it if I actually bite into a juicy, delicious apple while learning it.
Precisely. Experiencing language in action through
Ah.
conversations, movies, music,
Yeah.
it helps cement those words and phrases in your memory.
So ditch the boring textbooks, embrace the world around you. I like it. Now, are there any other construction secrets you can share? How do we make these memories last?
Another powerful technique is spaced repetition. Think of it as a workout schedule for your brain. Instead of cramming all your study sessions together, you space them out over increasing intervals,
Oh, okay.
giving your brain time to really absorb the information.
So it's like those rest days between workouts,
Yes, they are.
essential for letting your muscles rebuild and grow stronger.
Exactly.
Mm.
And just as important is active recall. It's one thing to passively recognize a word,
Right.
but it's another level entirely to be able to produce it from memory to use it in a sentence.
Ah, so that's where those dreaded quizzes come in handy.
Yes.
They actually help.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They force your brain to work a bit harder, which strengthens those connections even further.
I've got to say, I'm feeling a lot more motivated to test myself now.
Yeah.
What about those moments where learning feels effortless, like when a new phrase just clicks?
Hmm.
Does emotion play a role in all this?
You're spot on. Our brains are wired to remember things better when they're attached to strong emotions. Whether it's laughter, a sense of achievement, or even a little embarrassment. Remember that recipe analogy?
Yeah.
Imagine spilling flour everywhere while trying to make a cake.
Hmm.
You'd probably remember that vocabulary word for flour next time.
Oh, I've been there.
Yeah.
Those language mishaps definitely stick with you. Speaking of things that stick with you, what about sleep? Does getting enough shut-eye actually help solidify these new language skills?
It absolutely does. Think of sleep as hitting the save button on all that new learning. While you rest, your brain is hard at work, consolidating memories, strengthening those neural connections we talked about, and basically prepping you for the next round of language learning.
Wow, so our brains are literally building those language houses while we sleep. That's incredible.
Yeah.
This entire deep dive has been a fascinating journey. From the microscopic level of our synapses to the big picture benefits of bilingualism, we've explored how language learning can actually reshape our brains, making them stronger, more adaptable, and even more resilient to age-related decline. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling pretty inspired to dust off my Duolingo and get practicing. What about you?
It really is remarkable. And the most exciting part is that we're only just beginning to understand the full potential of the human brain.
That's a thought-provoking point to end on. If learning one new language can have this much of an impact, imagine the possibilities of learning a second, a third, a fourth. The sky's the limit.
Yeah.
So to everyone listening, keep exploring, keep challenging yourself, and keep those language learning muscles working. You might be surprised at what your brain can accomplish.